appreciate it. So we have and by the way, I see a few familiar names there. Um, but I have an architecture practice in Redondo Beach, and we specialize in custom single-family residential architecture. And there are 14 of us, and we design homes all up and down the California coast, with the vast majority being in LA, and the vast majority, and LA, the greater Los Angeles area. And the majority of that being the South Bay, Manhattan Beach, Hermosa Beach, Redondo, Palos Verdes, with a good number being in Palos Verdes. So, seeing as this is a very small group, I am more than happy to turn this into a conversation. So, if any of you guys want to unmute yourselves at any time and ask any questions, that would be great. So, today's presentation is on pre-design, and pre-design is basically what occurs prior to design taking place. So, you basically have lots of research that needs to be done on certain lots. For example, if you have a lot in Manhattan Beach, you can look to your left and look to your right and kind of figure out about what you can build. But if you're in Manhattan Beach on a triangular lot, or you are in Palos Verdes, for example, where all the lots are different, it is not necessarily that straightforward. And what pre-design does is it enables our clients to understand what it is that they're getting into before they get into it. So we'll often be hired during an escrow period, during a contingency period, when we can give some very important answers to people who are interested in doing something to their lot. And again, please feel free to unmute yourself and just ask a question. Doesn't even have to be on this particular topic. If you're interested in landslides, if you're interested in ADUs, if you're interested in anything, just unmute yourself and ask. I am more than happy to answer the question. Unless anyone has any questions right off the bat, I will get started. So pre-design has two different pieces to it, right? So one piece is price analysis and one piece is site analysis. So price analysis is basically where we look at a particular lot or a particular home to see, does it make sense between the land and the improvement from an equity perspective. And what I hear often is, I want to build a new house, but I don't want to overbuild for the area. And so that's what we help people avoid. We help people avoid it by doing price analysis. And this is something that you guys can help with as well, right? The component that you may not have would be the cost of construction, which I'm always happy to chat about. So then you have views, right? So you have basically site analysis is everything else that you need to analyze in order to move forward with something. So views is a big portion of that. People pay a lot of money for their view, and to be able to get it is important, and to be able to maximize it is important, but that sometimes comes at a cost. Imagine for a moment that this is a lot, and on the right side is the high side, and on the left side is the low side. The most economical place to put the home would be where the contours are close together, where we have the flattest part of the land, it's the most cost-effective place to build, and also parallel to the contour lines where you're not digging into slope. But if the view is in this direction, it makes sense that you'd want to get higher and you'd want to angle your house towards the view. But the problem with that, of course, is it comes at a cost. And so your construction cost is going to be higher because you're digging out of the earth on the high side and you're filling it in on the low side, and you're on a steeper area of the lot. But sometimes it's important, and people need to know these things before they get into them, right? If someone's expecting to spend $500 a foot, and then they end up spending $800 a foot, then they have a sour taste in their mouth.
Joseph,
Yes, please.
is this type of analysis able to be done during the escrow period, or is this a more long drawn out process?
So it can be done during escrow, right? So basically, this type of analysis can be done within about a week, right? And I'm going to get into some other things that we can do as well. But yeah, it takes about a week to get this done properly. So it usually fits within a contingency period if people are looking for some answers. Now, in order to get 100% assurance that you can do what you want to do, you actually have to go through the permitting process, right? So you have to get planning approval and HOA approval and city approval, and that cannot be done during an escrow, right? So, and you're never 100% sure until you can put your shovel in the ground, but we can bring people from a 30% assurance that they can do what they want to do to about an 85% assurance that they can do what they want to do, right? Which usually gives people the peace of mind to be able to move forward.
Got it. So what's the cost associated with more of like a brainstorming what is possible with this house type?
Well, so sometimes a site visit is enough, and a site visit is $575. Sometimes that's it. Sometimes we just get we get our clients enough information for them to make their decision with just that site visit. Other times it requires further analysis, and it requires looking at codes and drawing diagrams and talking to the city. And if that's the case, then it's more, right? And it depends. It ranges usually from about $2,000 to $4,000, depending on what we're analyzing at that point. But again, I'd say at least half the time, the site visit is plenty.
Great. Thank you.
Um, okay, great. So you have, again, going back to views, let's say we're in Palos Verdes Estates, for example. This particular picture was taken from a neighbor who was objecting to one of our projects. So it was taken from the objecting neighbor's driveway, basically, right? And this neighbor objected at the planning commission, right? There's a planning commission hearing for every new home that gets designed in Palos Verdes Estates. And they said that this house was too high. They said it was blocking their view. And I'll show you where our proposal is. You can kind of see it right here. If you can see these flags that are required to be put up, that is where the home was. And he said we were, quote, decimating his view. So the planning commission heard this, and they made us lower the house. So people in Palos Verdes Estates really have to understand what they're getting into when they're buying something that they want to develop. Now, with that being said, this client wasn't that upset about this. I mean, they thought it was ridiculous, but we told them all about this. We set their expectations. We said, look, you're going to have to lower the house no matter what we go in with, you're going to have to lower the house. And so when it eventually happened, they weren't upset because we had set their expectations at a certain height, and that's what we ended up getting for them. They still grumbled, but I mean, who wouldn't with an objecting neighbor like that? So noise sometimes has to be taken into account, right? So in this case, this is Palos Verdes Drive South. And we had a home. So we basically had someone who hired us during escrow to help them figure out whether noise was going to be a problem for them, right? Because you have traffic down below. And so what we figured out is that you can, in order to get this view and not have the noise, we can create a wall that was a certain height, and you can grow foliage up to a certain height as well. And that blocked most of the view of the traffic and a good portion of the noise. We also had a sound consultant come out and help analyze this as well. And they said, yeah, if you do this, you're going to knock your noise down by quite a bit. And they ended up moving forward with the house. Here you have a home in Manhattan Beach that we designed. What happened with this one, again, we were approached during escrow. There are power lines in front of this building, and the power lines drape straight across the front of the property, like right up against the property line. And it's right in the way of the view. And part of our analysis was to figure out, can we get a house designed that would match the floor plate, this floor plate here, with the power lines? And we analyzed it. We figured out that yes, we can make that work. And so they ended up closing on the house, and we designed a house for them. And the power lines are literally draped right here in front of the house. But you'd never know it looking at the view. Then you also have potential protected trees to worry about, right? So we had a lot in LA that we were called out to analyze, where there were 3 protected oak trees that needed analysis. And what they thought is, well, with the protections here, we're only going to be able to put a home here, and that's not going to work for us. So we did some research, and we figured out that it would take the better part of a year, 9 months to a year, to get these trees removed before you could actually start on a submittal to the city. They said, no problem, we're going to go for it anyway. They went for it, and we ended up designing a home on that lot. Which Sophia, by the way, we should put in this presentation so that they can see the final product. So there's also soils and site drainage that you have to worry about, right? So imagine that the home here is in the middle of this lot. You've got a high slope up top. Price can be a huge factor in the purchase of a property. And having a property like this, you have to worry about site drainage, on the top of the slope, also underground water as well. And that can have a big effect. It can increase the cost of construction by, upwards of $50 a foot. So it's an important number to have. There is also bedrock, right? If bedrock is where this brown line is shown right here, and you're building a basement and it's sitting on that bedrock, fantastic. You're sitting on bedrock. It's a great surface to build on. You don't have additional costs. But if your bedrock is down here, then you essentially have to build your home on underground stilts, which are called caissons or piles. And those can be really expensive. We just got a quote for one yesterday, and it was $500,000 for caissons. Speaking of caissons, this is a home in Palos Verdes Estates that we designed. It's done now, although we don't have the final pictures on this one quite yet. What they're doing is they're lifting up 120-foot tall I-beams, right, wide flanges that are getting dipped down into holes and then encased in concrete. So, to put that in perspective, that's 12 stories of concrete and steel underneath a 1-story home. So, that's what is required. And by the way, none of those houses surrounding have that requirement. But since the Northridge earthquake, California has upped their standards. And so now they require you to be embedded in bedrock. And especially, I'm sure with the slides, that will probably increase standards even more. And then you have height limits, right? So sometimes the height limits are based on the actual slope of the property. In Hermosa Beach, there's what's called a convex slope analysis, which means if your slope is shaped like a dome, for example, then your height limit can be shaped like a dome. You have to do a special application for that, and that's an additional 6 months onto the process. But when you get it, you can get a much higher home because of it. And we have achieved that a few times now. But most of the time, they're based on the 4 corners of the lot, and this is the type of home you might get with that. Sometimes they're based on the lowest grade, and with the lowest grade, This is a home that you might get with that. And I wish it were up here, but it never is. Um, so site analysis. You also can get a variance sometimes, right? But not nearly as often as what people hope for. So I often get asked, can I get a variance? And the answer is usually no, because most people don't understand what a variance is for. A variance is not for, oh, I'm at my setback and I just want to increase, I just want to go into my side yard setback a little bit further, or you know what? I have this roof that would make a really cool rooftop deck, and all I need to do is add a railing on top, and I could have my rooftop deck. Well, if you're over your height limit, people say, "Well, can't I just get a variance for that? The house is already there." The answer is no, right? That's not what a variance is for, and the city does not grant those kinds of variances typically. This is typical, right? So there are exceptions, but usually not. What a variance is really for is for a lot that is different from is a lot that's different from every other lot nearby, that where you can't get what all of your neighbors can get. So, for example, this lot here may have a setback of X, right? If you were to build a home here, you can't get that same front yard setback, and so your home would be much smaller. So you have a decent chance of getting a variance for this house. Um, and this might be something that someone would want to go for. And this lot, of course, you have to get a variance or you won't be able to build anything. And so I would be surprised if you didn't get a variance for this house. And here you can see there are houses all over the place that have conditions like this where they did end up getting variances, which you can see here. This is much closer than normally legally allowed, and same thing here. So normal cost per square foot right now, starting in the beach cities, is $600 a foot. It's hard to find a new home in the beach cities, custom home, that is less than $600 a foot. You still can build for $500 a foot, but it's hard and it's not great architecture. But then if you do a basement, right, the further down you go, the more expensive it is. So, a little bit further down, it might be $50 extra a square foot. And if you go down quite a bit, it can be $700 a foot. It could be $100 more, right? Which can be very expensive. So that's why a lot of people don't end up doing basements, such as, here's a house that we designed where we did not do a basement. And you can see the result here. So, and this was done by a developer who really wanted to get the maximum equity on sale that they could out of this property. So then you have, let's say you're in a lot in North Redondo and you need an analysis done to see how much square footage can I get on this lot if I do a duplex. So a pre-design would essentially, we'd lay it out and we'd say, okay, here's the absolute most efficient way that you could possibly do anything on this lot. And in the case of these North Redondo lots, you can get about $2,500 or 2,500 square feet per unit. Here's what an actual pre-design looks like. So this is this is a lot in Rolling Hills where a client of mine wanted to get a lot split. And so we helped them analyze this. This is, we basically, went through a quick exercise to figure out that yes, they can technically get a lot split, but in Rolling Hills, there's still a rule that says you must get permission from everybody nearby in order to actually do a lot split, which is a hard thing to do. He said, all right, worst case scenario, I'll build a home on it. He closed on the lot and he went around, talked to the neighbors, and everyone was willing to sign off except for one neighbor. And because that one neighbor, he ended up saying, well, forget it, we can't do it. And so he hired us to design a home on this lot, which we have designed. So that one is getting permitted right now. That one's a 20,000 square foot home. But you can see here the site analysis has a bunch of numbers, right? So it says here are all the potential areas. Here are all the potential areas that the city requires you to analyze, right? And when you kind of look at all these numbers, we help our clients analyze what these all mean, and therefore how much square footage you can actually place on the lot. And that's it. That's the end of the quick presentation. I would love to answer any questions about anything having to do with pre-design. I'm happy to chat with you guys about, again, the landslides if you're interested in talking about that. Um, anything you guys want to chat about, I'm happy to discuss.
So Joseph, so we do have a question from Jason Buck.
Great.
How deep into the bedrock does a caisson need to be drilled?
So thanks, Jason. The answer is it depends, right? So a caisson typically would go in. A good rule of thumb is about a third of the caisson needs to be in bedrock. And if bedrock's really deep, then you've got to go really deep. So it can end up being very expensive. Did that answer your question, Jason? Well,
Pretty much. I was just wondering if there was a guideline.
guideline, I mean, so we just did we just got back some plans for a home that requires caissons. The distance to bedrock varied from 6 feet to 24 feet. And the rule was that this particular site required about 12 feet embedment into the bedrock, right? So 12 feet plus the depth of the soil up to the house. So sometimes they were, 40 feet deep, and other times they were 20 feet deep. Yeah. Thank you for that question.
Does I know Manhattan Beach has a you can go on their website and look up, like, search by address, and it'll give you a parcel report with like basic setback rules for that particular lot. I don't know if you've used that feature before, but it's really a great resource. Does PBE have anything like that online?
No, and the reason is, so that's a good question. The reason is because the setbacks are determined by the art jury every time. So because the lots are so atypical, they actually make a judgment call. So there are basic rules, and if you're in an area that are, where the lots are rectangular, where it's easy to figure out, then the setbacks are fairly standard. But you still have to walk into the art jury and ask them what they are, because they don't. I mean, there are general rules that you can look up, but you still have to verify with them. So I wish it were as simple as that. So we had one, actually, a triangular lot in Palos Verdes Estates, and it essentially, one side of the triangle was on one street, another side was on was on another street, basically, right? And so this particular lot had 2 front yard setbacks, which are the largest setbacks that there are. So they had 2 front yards and 1 side yard. And that was contrary to what the code said. So they still get to make a judgment call, depending on a number of factors. The other thing that's interesting about PVE is if you have a normal lot, your side yard setbacks aren't necessarily the same on each side. It's basically like an addition problem. They give you a total side yard setback, and you can kind of like make one side bigger and the other side smaller up to a certain point. So there's a little bit of freedom in that. But no, there's no easy way to just go and look it up. I wish that there was.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a question from Lily Lee. So regarding the landslide area, if the house is located near the landslide area, should the owners check the foundation now and make some risk management plan in advance?
And I guess the question is that, are we asking about risk management for somebody who already lives there or somebody who's looking to buy, right? So somebody who already lives there, yeah, I mean, for sure. I think that it would be a good thing for them to talk to a soils engineer. There are a few on the Hill that have, all the data. And they're good resources to call. They charge a fee to come out or to chat with you and let you know if you're okay or if you're going to be okay. The answer is no one knows for sure, but they think that you can gain kind of a an amount of assurance based on these phone conversations. So yeah, I mean, if you're nearby, I would definitely ask because you never know. And some of these locations have started cracking where no one thought that they were going to crack, but soils engineers looking back said, yeah, it makes sense that they cracked up there. So would be a good thing to check, I would say.
Who
And then
are
if you're
people
what's
that
that?
you, who are a couple of those people that you use? I have a listing in the same situation. We're outside of the landslide zone, but I'm getting a lot of concern about the unknown, and I'm just looking for anything that I can provide them to put their mind at ease, potential buyers.
So the one that I would contact is Todd Housel with Coast Geotech. And it's spelled Housel. And here I can put this up here. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
So he's a good one. He's the one actually that the city hired. The city of Rolling Hills hired. I'm sorry, city of Rolling Hills hired them. So basically, they know more about this than almost anybody. But really, any good soils engineer is going to have a good idea who does work in PV. All right. Any other questions anyone has?
I have one more. Sorry, I have a lot of questions.
No, yeah, ask away. Ask away.
Rocky Point, building restrictions, I know is 1 story only, but is there anything else unique about that area?
Well, you can build 2-story on Rocky Point if you're on the other side, right? If you're on the coast side, then it's 1 story. But anything else? Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that it's really expensive. That video that I showed you was a house on Rocky Point. So the caissons are going to have to go down quite a long ways, and they can be very expensive. Can range from $800,000 to $2 million just in foundation costs there. That's before you even do anything fun. It's just to hold the building up. So I'd say foundation is the big one. Oh, I mean, the other thing, here's another interesting thing to know about it. Your lot area is not set on the cliffside, right? So basically, if you have a lot area of this, but some of it sloughs off into the ocean, your new lot area is smaller. And Rocky Point, in areas of Rocky Point, at least where we did our design, he's losing a foot of his land to the ocean every 10 years on average. So, he figures that by the time it gets back to him, he'll be gone. But it's still a risk to take because the California Coastal Commission doesn't actually let you stabilize the cliff. They want it to naturally erode. And so they don't let you do anything to make it stable. And so you just have to let it go. You have to let it go into the ocean. And did that answer your question, Jennifer?
Yes, thank you so much.
Great. Does anyone else have any other questions for me? Burning architectural questions about Palos Verdes or building in Manhattan Beach or Hermosa, anything like that? All right. Well, good. Well, thank you all for having me. I appreciate it. This was fun, and hopefully I'll get to see you all again soon.
Okay, thank you, Joseph, and thank you everybody for joining us today, and to Jennifer for her great questions.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so last chance, anybody, if you want to ask a question before Joseph leaves. Otherwise, I will send out his information. You can contact him directly and going once, going twice. All right. Thank you, everybody. All right. Thank you, Joseph.
Thanks a lot. Take care.